Hello and welcome, Glorious Badger here. Today we are doing the last part of the Necron Overlord. Today we'll be breaking out the oils. For example, a black oil paint, a burnt umber oil paint, and turquoise lights from Abtil Lung 502. Those are the only three we'll be using today. Meanwhile, make sure you've liked, subscribed, and tickled that notification bell, and you won't miss another one. So I tend to put my oil paints onto a bit of cardboard to absorb the excess oil, and I use an odorless thinner. Odorless is very important. I accidentally purchased an odorful one before, and it was a disaster. Many headaches ensued. Right, here we go then. Okay, so unfortunately I've not mixed any of these oils up on camera. However, this particular one is definitely thinned down a lot. It's supposed to be more of a panel liner than a thick sort of a thicker type wash. Just trying to get it into all of the sort of panels, surprisingly enough, although I don't quite know why I did the panels on the spear thing. However, all of those little bits of jewelry and armor panels, I do try and get this thinner kind of wash in. Unfortunately, I can't remember that ratio that I used to make it very thin. Unfortunately, it is just the way it worked out this time. However, in future, I will be going over it. Just not on this video. We are trying to get a big thumbs up, which we just got. I waited for it all to dry. I probably might have even blitzed it with the hairdryer to speed the process up a little bit. It was quick, though, because there was not much pigment that needed drying. It was mostly just the white spirits which needed removing. So we got this cotton bud. It is a dry cotton bud, and we are just removing the majority of any remaining black pigment which has not gone into the panel lines, which is where we wanted it. We are going to, you'll see we coated the entirety of the sort of glowing stuff. We will add some glow back to it later on. But for now, we're just sort of giving it a good old rub down with this bad boy. As you can see, they do fall apart the more they get used. It is unfortunately one of the things I dislike about cotton buds. They do leave sort of little threads of cotton, which will need removing. So keep your eyes peeled for them. If you see any floating around, just get them with some tweezers or something. It's not a complete disaster. But there we go. It's moving in the right direction at least. And now, what are we going to do? We're going to cut. Okay, fantastic. What do we reach? Burnt umber. Okay, so this is the next. This is a heavier wash. More of a wash than a panel line, which is what we did before. In future, I might do them the other way around, but this is the way we've done it. As you can see, this particular wash is a lot thicker. It is more pigmented. You can see that the thinners, the liquid isn't like pooling straight away. It's not going down with gravity and just pooling at the base of the particular bit of plastic. It is quite, viscous, which is how I like things generally with these oil washes, because then the pigment stays over the entire surface as I like it. Now we have fast forwarded. I probably did indeed hit it with the hairdryer again to speed things up for the video. Making sure the surface is completely dry is what I generally like to do. Not start doing what I'm doing right now with the cotton bud. I like the surface to be somewhat dry. I don't like it to be completely fresh with the liquid. Now, this cotton bud, I believe, is slightly damp. So I'll have dipped it into the thinner, into some clean thinners, and just sort of waited for it to sort of dry off a bit, so it's surprisingly enough damp, and then I'm just removing the excess burnt umber wash from the body. Specifically, we want to clear up the tops of the sort of shoulder parts where sunlight is facing. Anywhere we want it to be the magenta to sort of shine through. That is the main goal of that. And we're now going to use this brush to spot clean any bits which we really want to shine. So tops of the shoulders, as I was just saying, his face, any sort of upper surfaces. Just like that, really. It's that has been dipped into some thinners, but we're just focusing on specific areas with this rather than the entire miniature. So as I was saying, the face, the shoulders, upper facing surfaces. Now in this particular video, I don't do it, but what I am starting to do moving on is once this layer is dried and it's sealed, I go back and paint over these surfaces I'm cleaning up right now. I would go back later with the original magenta, put down a newer layer just to brighten things up even more. However, you will see that probably on one of the higher up Necrons if we paint one. We will use that process. This guy's still supposed to be slightly grubby. Lovely stuff. Right. I'm wondering what the next step is. I know. But the question is, do you know? You see those little chips of where the armor has chipped and we've got through to the metal underneath? Yeah. I'm thinking that needs some corrosion of some sort. I'm just wondering at this point what a good color for corrosion would be against this magenta. Oh, all right. Went a bit weird there. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but there we go. Turquoise lights. That is the color we're going to use. We're going to put some of that onto this cardboard. As I said before, the cardboard is good for wicking away some of the oil within the oil paint. These particular Abtiolung 502s have less of it in. The Winsor & Newton ones, the sort of artist oils, they do tend to be a bit more oily. That's generally why they go on that cardboard. So we're putting this turquoise oil paint pretty much directly onto where we want these chips and stuff to be, where we want a little bit of extra color. I use weathering. It's not always realistic the way I do it, but I use it to add little points of color. As we can see, it is getting dropped onto all those little scratches, and then we are using a damp brush to kind of thin them out, shape the bits of color as we want them to be. Going back again to add a little bit more if we've missed any spots. As you can see, I'm dragging down as though he's been standing in the rain for a bit. For quite a while, and then awoken. Okay, so this brush has been dunked into some thinners. And as you can see, we're dragging those turquoise streaks downwards. I'm going to have to cut that. The footage keeps going slightly weird. Okay, so we did in fact get the turquoise where we wanted it to go. And now we're breaking out the streaking grime. In previous videos, I've definitely gone over the top with it, covering the entire miniature with this stuff. I have moved on a little bit since then. I generally just try to be a bit more focused with where it goes. So I won't cover the entire miniature with it. Generally, I'm sure there will come at some point when I do that. I think at this point I am focusing on the legs. Probably the majority of this streaking grime I would like on the lower legs especially. And slightly up the torso. I think that's generally my plan with this. And obviously we are going to go back with a clean brush. Well, as clean as I got, which is pretty disgusting with this one. But we are also shaping that streak and grime with this brush, which has been put into thinners and touched to a bit of paper cloth to sort of clean it off. There we go. Probably not seeing a huge amount of difference. Some people might not even want to bother with this step at all, but it's a phase I like to do. Okay, I'm thinking this is looking pretty good as things currently stand. Just trying to tidy things up a little bit before we move on to the next stage. Okay, I'm liking the sort of little bits of turquoise we're seeing here. It's adding a bit of visual interest, adding a bit of change in sort of surface coloration, etc., which is always a good thing. Now, I'm pointing at those things. Yes, as I said before, we do need to clean those with some spirits. We need to clean it with some odorless thinners. I don't know if I'm going to do that on camera because it appears that I have lost a bit of footage. However, before that, we're going to do the base. So we've got AK Interactive Terrain's Sandy Desert. We've also got a sponge. In fact, this sponge is from an old Games Workshop blister from years ago when I purchased something. It is good. I like the sponge because the holes are not compressed within it. It's got a nice amount of air bubbles within it, which will give us some nice texture when we use it. Now, so we are just slapping this stuff on. I've got a dental tool or a sculpting tool to put this stuff on with. Sort of smearing it on. We're not going to go really thick with it. I suppose it depends on what kind of surface you're going for, but we are putting it straight onto the base. As you can see, it's already got paint or pigment in there. So okay, so we are going to wait a little bit for that base to dry off a little bit. It's going to be a bit of practice you might need. You probably don't want to be doing this stage when that texture is straight on the base, but you don't want to leave it too long that it becomes too awkward to work with. I can't quite remember how long it is. Obviously, the thicker you put the texture on, the longer it'll take to dry. So mileage may vary. You're going to have to test yourself. However, it's not an issue. I just put this little bit of sponge on. I sort of fold it in half so there's no sort of great big edges on it. I hold it in this pair of tweezers just like that, and I use that action into the texture. That sort of up and down motion. And move on. Now, this sponge will get filled up with texture basing material, and it will need rinsing. So every so often you will have to rinse it in some water and then return it, then dry it off as much as possible. You don't want excess water in that little bit of sponge, and then you can get back to adding texture to the base. I have accidentally dumped a whole load of water on it before, and it smoothed everything out, and I had to basically wait for it to dry almost and start again. It's a bit of a disaster. However, as you can see, the surface is somewhat drier now, and we can move on to the... Oh, hello. That's going to need painting over later. Oops. Yeah, that was a bit of a disaster. Okay. But you can see that the surface is a lot drier, or certainly drier than it was. As you can see, we're just tapping it against the surface, applying enough pressure to leave some of that sponge texture, waiting for it to dry. And I'm going to zoom in. There we go. That's slightly better. Because as you can see, when we've smoothed this texture on, that stuff does get quite smooth and you get tool marks in it. It's not really what we want. Look at that. See, it's nice and sort of grainy now. Lovely. And we just repeat that as much as you want, really. As you can see, that sponge is getting pigment in it and all that jazz. I have just rinsed it off and waited for it to dry a little bit. Now that is the kind of surface I'd like there. However, this is what we're left with. That will dry up quite nicely. I do have to go back. Okay. So at this point, we break out the white ink and the, the fluorescent magenta, one of my favorite paints, to do the glowing stuff. Obviously, we've since cleaned off the orbs on the shoulders, as you can see. And we're using the white ink to go into all of these grooves on this power weapon. We are going to do the eyes as well. I do thin the ink down ever so slightly, hopefully. And that should go into these crevices nicely and should be easy to clean up if you make a disaster. I might even do a demonstration of that for you any moment now. Or not. No. There we go. That was just for demonstration purposes, I promise. I promise. Okay. So we put some white ink into those eye sockets and left it dry. Things are a bit out of order. I couldn't quite figure out what happened there, but unfortunately, that's just the way it goes sometimes. However, the fluorescent magenta, what we're going to do is we're going to put some of this onto a palette. We're going to mix in some water. We're going to just drop some into the eyes right there. That's it. Now, you can build up multiple layers of this stuff. The eyes were slightly too much, as you can see. I went back later, just then, in fact, to wick away any of the excess. But yeah, we are slowly dropping this into, we're over this white ink layer. And the white behind putting the fluorescent paint down over the white does make the fluorescent paint glow. It gives the sense that it's glowing at least, or it's light. Sort of, as you can see right there. All right, those eyes definitely look like they're glowing. And they're definitely tinted magenta, which is what I wanted. One could add more layers of magenta to that power weapon. However, we're going to move on to do some yellow-green onto these rings. Remember, I said earlier, they do need tidying up a little bit. So that is what we're doing right now, adding that little bit of greenish yellow or yellowish green brightness back to the power cables. And power things like up on that cable there. And hopefully we're going to get some of the cables on his stomach area, because I can see from this video footage that it is a bit dirty. Got that cable. We've got that one. We're going to do his tummy cables. Go on. We're going to do it? I don't know. I think I might have just put it away. Oh, there's my hair. Rightfully sorry about that. Yeah, it does. I don't know if we're going to do the stomach. I think we're forgetting it at this point. Oh, there we go. Finally. Well done, Badger. So I'm looking at it. Apart from the base, which we could have probably done a little bit of a wash on. We could have watered down some agrax, put that onto the sand, and then dry brushed over it with some dark sand and then some shabty bone or something. Apart from that, we are finished. There's a big thumbs up from me. I'd like to say thank you very much for hanging out with me today. I do stream over on Twitch at twitch.tv/gloriousbadger. And hopefully I can also see you there. But otherwise, I do a video every Wednesday and every Saturday. Thank you and goodbye.